Don't Depend on Daddy is an unfiltered safe space, empowering young professionals to build independence in their 20s and beyond, whether it be personal, professional, or financial. Regardless of your age, relationship status, or job title, the most consistent person in your life is you. So join me and let's build our independence together. Enjoy! Hello and welcome back to Don't Depend on Daddy, the podcast. My name's Michaela. I am your host, and today we are doing a very long overdue Q&A episode. So really I'm going to be focusing on money and career questions that you all submitted to me about a week ago now over on my Instagram story. I'm super excited. But before we get into it, I'm going to very quickly run through our usual housekeeping. So as always, first things first, you can get $10 off the Personal Finance Dashboard when you use the code podcast1. This is a podcast exclusive code. If you ever have any issues with it, just send me an email. Happy to get it all sorted out for you. I also want to remind you that I have two other super quick templates. First is the basic budgeting template. So when we're thinking about my, suite of templates here, we have the Personal Finance Dashboard, which is really like my signature tool, okay? It's the most comprehensive. It's the tool that I use. You can manage your budget, your monthly budget, annual budget, net worth, financial goals, all that kind of stuff in there. And you also get the nice, big, beautiful dashboard. But if you are thinking that, okay, this might be a little bit too advanced for me or a little bit too overwhelming, then I would recommend you check out the basic budgeting template. So I created this template based off of your guys' requests last year. And essentially, it's a simplified version of the PFD, really focused on budgeting. So a monthly budget. You do get some annual insights, but not as much as within the Personal Finance Dashboard. And it's also great to just get in the habit of tracking your expenses, because that is definitely an essential if at any point you want to upgrade to the PFD. In addition to both of those templates, I also would recommend, if you are someone who is interested in really running your numbers in terms of retirement, long-term planning, potentially retiring early from your job, which I think a lot of us are probably interested in doing, I'd recommend you check out my Financial Independence Planner. I created this earlier this year, really with the goal of answering the question, how much? How much do I need to save for retirement? How much do I need to put towards retirement? How much do I need in retirement? How much do I need to earn in order to have enough for retirement? So all of those questions can be answered within that template. I think it's a really great tool for adding on to either the PFD or the basic budgeting template. So food for thought. All of those templates, tour videos, how to use them, etc., everything you need to know is in the show notes as always. So you can always go check that out. And with that, that's really the only updates that I have for you. I do also want to let you know I have been seeing your guys' comments, just in general, the positive feedback, how much you're enjoying the show. That really means a lot to me, because I've definitely been focusing on trying to bring diversity in terms of topics to the show, guests to the show. I do need to bring on some more guests soon. I feel like I, get into a rhythm with guests and then they fall off and whatnot. But I've been seeing your comments and I really appreciate it. And I'm starting to see a little bit more growth on the podcast over the last couple of months, which is very exciting for me, because I've been doing this show for a while. And I feel like over the last 6 months to a year is really when I've caught my stride in terms of the topics and things that I want to talk about. So thanks so much for the support. If you are a new listener, hello and welcome. And if you are a returning listener, thanks for being here. Let me know too, at the end of this, if you enjoy these Q&A episodes, because I did go through a period of time a little bit ago where I would do a monthly Q&A, but I found that, it was kind of repetitive. So maybe I'll do these quarterly, or if you want to do Q&A, not focused on money and career, let me know. I figured it's been a while since we've actually talked money and career on the show, just because I really try to focus primarily on lifestyle stuff here. But if you're interested in more, I would say business career topics, because my money topics are my separate YouTube videos, which if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, you should be. I'm having a lot of fun on YouTube and a lot of fun with long form content. So yeah, all this to say, long story long, because I just can't get to the point today. If you enjoy this, let me know. If you have business career topics you want me to get into, also let me know. And yeah, let's just get into the freaking show. So I have 5 finance questions that I'm going to get into in detail. And I also have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 career questions. So 10 questions total. I always take questions from my Instagram stories. So I don't post a lot of Q boxes. I honestly should be posting more Q boxes over on my Instagram. I'm just feeling like, I don't know if it's because of all the travel. I mean, I feel like that's probably it. But the last couple weeks, I've been feeling a little bit overwhelmed and behind, which is not a good feeling. I don't have any travel plans until after Labor Day, so I'm hoping that over the next couple of weeks, I can get back into a good rhythm and get ahead on my content so that I'm not feeling as much of like a cluster when it comes to getting things out on time. But anyways, I always take questions from Q boxes over on Instagram. So if you ever want to submit a question, not only do you need to make sure you're following me on my Instagram, Break Your Budget, but you also got to be watching my stories because I don't have a set schedule for when I post Q boxes. So you just kind of have to be there to participate in the fun. Okay, with that, let's get into it. So we'll start with the finance questions. This first one being, I'm 24 and I'm feeling lost financially. Should I pay off my student loans or should I focus on saving? I love this question because it covers a couple of really important things. I think the first being the financial order of operations and like most important priorities. I feel like the fact that this person mentions they're 24 is a little bit irrelevant because it doesn't really matter how old you are. It really just matters at what phase you are in your financial journey, but I'll target this towards, sort of beginner stages, which is usually where people fall in their early to mid 20s. So when it comes to the financial order of operations, there are a couple of things you want to focus on in order. First being that you save up an emergency fund. So if this question was, which it didn't specify, should I pay off student loans or save an emergency fund? My answer would be pretty black and white, and I would say you should save your emergency fund first. So an emergency fund is 3 to 6 months of your expenses saved in a high yield savings account. I recommend when you're just getting started to save 2 months of your emergency fund because that's a little bit more of a digestible amount and sort of make sure that that is your only priority at first because your emergency fund is your financial fire extinguisher. So if you have an issue and you have an emergency fund, you can bridge that gap. If you don't have an emergency fund, generally you're either in a pinch or you have to, put it on your credit card, which is a problem. So I recommend 2 months to get started and then to buffer up that emergency fund and hit that 3 to 4 month mark, which in my opinion is the perfect sweet spot. You can sort of balance that savings with other financial goals. The second phase of the order of operations would be paying down any high interest debt, specifically credit card debt. So if you are someone who has credit card debt, first you want to make sure you have an emergency fund. So 2 months at a minimum, ideally 3 to 4. But if you have credit card debt, I think 2 months is fine. And then tunnel vision that credit card debt and eliminate it. If I had credit card debt, I would not be focused on any other financial goals outside of eliminating that debt. I know some people may disagree with me on that. However, the reason I feel that way is because credit card debt is one of those things that's incredibly difficult to get out of, especially if you're incurring expenses as you're paying it down. It's also super, super high interest. So the longer it takes you to pay it off, the more you're going to have to pay, and it compounds very quickly. So if I had credit card debt, I would eliminate it before moving on to any of the following things that I'm going to say. If you don't have credit card debt and you have a 2 to 3 month emergency fund, the next thing you want to focus on is making sure you are contributing to your retirement account. So that could be a 401k, an IRA, especially so if your employer offers a 401k match. You want to make sure you are taking advantage of that because that's free money. And then once you've hit those 3 rungs, you don't have any credit card debt, you have a 2 to 3 month emergency fund, you're contributing to your retirement account. The rest of it is sort of, a journey that requires balance, paying things off in tandem or focusing on goals in tandem and, making adjustments depending on your life situation. So the next couple of things could be paying down lower interest debt. So that could be paying down a student loan or a car loan or anything I would say under like 6 to 7% interest rates, saving for other short-term goals. So that could be saving up for a vacation, saving up for a down payment on a home, or saving up to buy a car or whatever. And then investing either more money into retirement. So depending on what your retirement goals are, which is why I recommend you check out that FIRE tracker because it can help you narrow the scope a little bit, or investing in a brokerage account. Again, really depends on your financial goals. I can't answer that point blank. But what I really want to emphasize here is that there is no prescriptive outside of those first three: emergency fund, pay off credit card debt, contribute to retirement. There is no prescriptive do this, not that when it comes to paying down student loans or saving for other short-term goals, because it depends on your life circumstance, how much money you have in student loans, what those interest rates are, the emotional baggage you carry, if there is any related to debt, if you have other shorter term savings goals that are higher priority, like maybe you're saving up for a wedding. So prioritizing having enough money to pay for a wedding without having to take out loans for it would be, in my opinion, a higher priority if you're, in the process of getting married, obviously, than making extra payments towards your student loans if those loans are low interest, because you'd be prioritizing that for maybe a year and then you can go back to your student loan. So it just totally depends. I recommend, if you're in this phase where you're kind of like, what do I do next, that you read my book, Own Your Money, which I don't talk about a lot. And I don't mean to make this episode a lot of plugs, but I do want to point you in the direction of where the resources are, because the resources are there and I've created them to help you with these kinds of things. So I would recommend you read Own Your Money or get your hands on this, especially if you're in your early 20s. It's designed to make the process of figuring out what to do financially easy. It's literally written super, super simply in easy, plain words. It has pictures and graphs and charts and stuff so that it's not overwhelming, and it will answer your questions and provide you the guidance on how to make the decisions for yourself, if that makes sense. Because again, I don't know you or your life, so I can't tell you do this, not that. Again, because it's so gray. But what I really want to emphasize is prioritizing financial goals beyond those first three that I mentioned isn't necessarily and doesn't have to be super linear. It's not okay, I have to, pay off my student loans, then I need to max out my retirement account, then I need to save for XYZ. It's sort of okay, maybe you want to pay off your student loans a little bit faster. So for a year, you prioritize putting your additional money towards extra payments on those loans. And then the next year, it's oh, I really want to go on a lovely vacation to Italy. So I'm going to hit my minimum on my student loans this year, and I'm going to prioritize putting money away so that I can book that trip. So it just depends. And what it really all ties back to is having an agile budget and plan for your finances, having a place where you can set those goals, having a place where you can plug and play, look at different scenarios and map out how you'll reach your goals, which again, you can do it in all my templates, but if you're looking to sort of do a plug and play scenario, I'd recommend the PFD. So that's my answer to that question. Moving on and sort of tandeming off of this, the next question here is, do you have any advice for paying off your student loans? And when it comes to student loans and really paying off any debt, the very first thing I recommend you do is pull up a debt amortization calculator and do a little bit of scenario analysis. So scenario analysis is a very scary phrase for just running your numbers in a few different cases. So with a debt amortization calculator, which there is one inside the personal finance dashboard in the debt log, but you can also just Google debt amortization calculator. You could probably do it in ChatGPT too if you're someone who uses that as a tool. What you're going to do is you plug in your interest rate, the total balance, your minimum payment, and it's going to give you an amortization schedule. So an amortization schedule is, again, just a fancy way to say the, plan on how these payments and interest rates are going to play out over the next X amount of years for reaching zero on that balance. It factors in the interest. It factors in your payments being divided up between principal and interest. And with this information and with a live calculator, you can change the amount of money that you're paying on this schedule. So let's say your minimum payments are $250 a month. You can change that payment to be, okay, if I paid that minimum $250 and then I also for 12 months paid an extra $200, what would the impact be on my debt payoff plan? Or, if you only paid the minimum, how long would it take for you to pay them off? How much would you pay in interest? This sort of planning and analysis is really, really, really helpful for getting a better understanding of what your debt payoff timeline is and what the impact can be on shorter sprints. So like a year of putting in extra payment or 2 years of paying double. Like sometimes what that can do is cut your payoff timeline literally in half. And if you are equipped with that information and knowledge, you can use it to make different decisions. So that's the very, very, very first thing I would do is use that debt amortization calculator. Again, there's one in the PFD, but you can also Google it, or you can use a ChatGPT. The other thing that I would do is make sure that you have a plan for any additional income. So when I say additional income, I mean like, let's say you are expecting a bonus from your job, or maybe you've started a side hustle and you're earning a couple extra $100 a month. Where are you putting that? Because if you have student loans and that's sort of like a high priority financial goal for you to pay those off, having a plan for when that money comes in to put it towards those loans, and again, using a debt amortization calculator to figure out what the impact of that extra money could be is a really essential step for paying those off even faster. So like if you have, let's say $30,000 in student loans and you can expect in, I don't know, April of 2026 that you're going to get a bonus and it's going to be $5,000. What impact would it have if you put 100% of that money towards your student loans? And if the impact is insignificant, then maybe you'd want to put half of it towards your loans and half of it towards going on another vacation, or putting it towards your emergency fund or another savings goal, right? So that is where knowing your numbers and having a plan is really important. I would also just emphasize to not let student loans consume your life, because at the end of the day, student loans are very normal, and I feel like sometimes people get really overwhelmed by them. And I don't want to undersell or like minimize the importance of paying off your loans, because you do have to pay them off, right? Like it's not really something we can avoid short of legislation, which unfortunately I don't think is going to happen in the near term. Could happen long term, but definitely not in the current state. Don't let them consume your life. Okay, you can focus on other goals. Student loans are generally lower interest debt, and it's not bad debt. You know, you got to go to school, right? If you want to get a specific type of job, it's important. It's good to learn. It's good to have that experience. Like it's a good thing. I know it can feel overwhelming, but you can prioritize paying them down with other goals. They don't have to be something that like consumes your every moment of your financial life. So really, really, really want to be super clear about that. This next question here is, now that you know your FIRE numbers, which are you leaning towards and why? So just as a refresher, FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And earlier this year, I built out my FIRE template because I crossed a net worth milestone. And I used this information to really calculate what my FIRE numbers were going to look like. So there are 3 key FIRE numbers that I focused on and included in this template. First being COSFI. So COSFI means that you have invested enough money for retirement to never have to invest any more money for retirement in over the course of X years until you hit your target retirement age, which you can select. I select 65 because that's just like the traditional age. You don't have to invest any more money and you'll still retire with enough money to cover your expenses, again, based off of your inputs. So I calculate my FIRE numbers off of being like super conservative. So if I was spending, $120,000 a year adjusted for inflation over the course of the next however many years, would I have enough money? And the answer to that is yes. Based off of, again, my target age, which is 65, which is very conservative. So I've actually already hit my COSFI number. The other FIRE numbers, first would be traditional FIRE, which is where you've invested enough money to never have to work again, based off of your annual expenses. This isn't something that I am personally working towards tirelessly. If I were to hit it due to a stroke of like continued high earning, which I don't know how long my runway is for earning at the level that I have been over the last few years, but hell yeah, I'm going to keep trying if I can, but it's not something I'm losing sleep over. Traditional FIRE, again, is one where it's like, it's very expensive and it's very hard to achieve. I don't want to put that pressure on myself. And I also just don't think that like, based off of lifestyle factors, it's a super realistic target for me short of winning the lottery. And then the other fire number is Baristify. And this is one where basically you are splitting your annual income. Part of it is drawing down your investments, and part of it is working a lower stress, non-traditional job. So barista is just the example. I know I've been criticized for saying that being a barista is a low pressure job. It's not that deep. I didn't come up with the term. And I think relative to some other types of jobs, it's just a different kind of pressure, right? Like, I don't think we have to be so black and white about it. But the whole point is you're able to quit your corporate job and work part-time, whether you are a barista or maybe you work in retail or you pursue some sort of hobby that's monetizable or whatever. It's just part-time income supplemented by drawing down your investment, so you don't have to work a super high pressure corporate job. My ultimate goal with financial independence is to not have to go back to a corporate job. Or if I do have to go back to a corporate job, only for a very short period of time, like a year, maybe 2, while I figure out what my other plan is, because that is not going to be my reality long term, because I did not thrive in that environment. So with all that information laid out, for me, the most important number to reach was my Coastfind number, which I did reach in terms of 65. And basically every year that I continue to invest for retirement, that age gets shorter and shorter. The challenge is, when you're thinking about retirement investments, I obviously, because of the way that I earn and how my business is set up right now, I want to make sure I'm continuing to invest for retirement so that I can take the tax deductions in current day. But I've actually already reached my Coastfind number long term. So what I need to figure out over the next few years is is there a way for me to optimize my retirement contributions where, I could potentially start opening an account that I could touch earlier, maybe separate from my other brokerage investments. I'm getting into the weeds, but long story short, Coastfind was most important to me. So I've reached it at age 65, and that's thinking only about my retirement accounts, my solo 401k. The other important one, which I already sort of alluded to, is Baristify. And that's because I don't really see myself traditionally retiring, maybe by my 50s, okay. Hopefully I've accumulated enough wealth by then. But over the next, 10 to 20 years, I don't see myself going fully retired. I don't think it's realistic. I don't operate that way. And I also think your 20s, 30s, 40s are really ripe for earning money, exploring different paths and such. So I'm more interested in Baristify, and I'm more interested in hitting that, it doesn't have to be right away, but over the course of my 30s or early 40s, I'd love to just not have to worry about work. It very much so, though, depends on lifestyle factors, right? Like purchasing a home. How would that impact my plans? Getting married, there's another income involved. How does that impact my plans? And then also potential family planning. Although I'm going to be completely straight with you, as of this moment in my life right now, I really don't think I'm interested in having children, but that could change depending on meeting the right person. So I need to just keep all of those factors in mind with these plans, but Coastfind and Baristify are the two that I'm most focused on. And I reevaluate and adjust these annually. So I'll be looking at them, or honestly really biannually. I relook at them every couple months. The next question here, what is the biggest money mindset shift that you've made? The big one for me is realizing that I finally I know from a number standpoint that I've reached it, but I finally feel inside of me that I've reached a point of financial freedom and I can actually enjoy my life. I know some of you guys who have been following along might hear that and think that I'm insane for just realizing it. But when it comes to being really financially disciplined, there are learned behaviors and habits that are hard to relinquish a little bit of control on. I also have OCD. Obviously, if you couldn't tell by just the way I operate, I have the freedom, time, and space to be able to spend my money on literally whatever I want in my day-to-day life. And I feel like over the last couple of months, I've really begun to notice that. And it feels really good. I'm finding that I'm more excited to spend money on doing things and doing activities. And it just feels good, honestly. So that's the biggest mindset shift that I've had. I don't feel like I'm constrained to a certain spending limit. I do have spending goals, obviously, and ranges I'd like to fall in. But given the phase of life I'm in where I am single, I don't have any dependents or responsibilities, I'm earning a lot of money, it feels finally like I've reached a place, not only financially, but also like in terms of maturity, where I can actually do whatever and the world is my oyster and I finally have the resources to do whatever I want. And it's an incredibly freeing feeling. It feels very exciting to me. And I'm trying to just embrace it because I, go through phases where sometimes I'm like, I wish my life was a little bit different, as I would imagine anyone similar in my situation. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. But I'm trying to embrace it and just really enjoy this phase of my life and use my money as the tool that it is to have fun and experience things and have a social life and make friends and do fun activities without feeling guilty or bad about it. So that's the biggest mindset shift that I have made. And I'm really working on not being so, obviously I'm diligent with the way I track my expenses and whatnot, particularly because I like to share that content and I know it's helpful for those of you who listen and watch and enjoy that. But I'm trying to not let like deviations from my plan or my budget, especially when they're immaterial, bog me down. That is where the OCD of it all sort of comes into play and why I mentioned that in the first place, because part of it is just like learned behavior that I'm working actively on unlearning, if that makes sense. So moving on, this last question related to finances here is, I still feel poor even though I'm reaching the 100K milestone. Why am I feeling this way? And I really wanted to answer this question because I relate to it a lot. I always thought that financial success meant hitting certain bank account numbers, right? Like I thought when I hit 100K, I was going to feel amazing. And then when I hit the next milestone, which is 250, I was going to feel even more free. And then, as those numbers creep up, and now I've crossed a handful of pretty large milestones, I can confidently say that working towards a number in the bank account, while it's a good benchmark for, staying motivated, a number isn't going to make you feel financially secure. And if you're constantly just chasing the numbers, like you're never going to feel like you have enough. I feel like part of the reason why I had this mindset shift that I just shared with you is because I've reached a lot of numbers and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't have another number I want to reach. And that feels really good. Like, yes, I have my plans and my fire numbers and whatnot, but those are more arbitrary than anything else. So really, I would recommend that if you're on your financial journey, getting to the 100K mark is kind of the hardest hurdle. And once you get there, things become a little bit easier and you sort of become more quote unquote advanced financially. But rather than chasing numbers after that benchmark, I would really chase individual goals and then also having and sticking to a plan, because financial freedom comes from consistency. It comes from habits. It comes from feeling empowered in your financial decisions and feeling like you are on a roadmap to success of how you want your life to look, as opposed to a roadmap towards a specific number in your bank account. Because transparently, for most people, like other people don't know the numbers in your bank account. And honestly, like nobody really cares. And you probably don't care as much as you think you do. So I would avoid setting too many milestone benchmark goals and associating success with a number, and instead work on associating success with having a plan that you can confidently stick to that allows you to spend your money in alignment and still work towards securing and buying back your financial future. And when I say buying back, I really mean like you can actually buy back years of your life if you invest consistently, as opposed to like feeling like you have to work until you're 65, because most people with a little bit of thought and intention actually do not. So with that, let's pivot into the career questions. So I have 5 career questions here. The first one is, how did you make the pivot from your 9 to 5 to content? So just as a little backstory and as a reminder, I'm going to do another quick plug here. I talk about this ad nauseum inside Own Your Career. This is a book I do not talk about enough. If you are feeling lost at work, you want to start a side hustle, you want to navigate corporate, you want to excel in your job, I highly recommend getting Own Your Career. Really good book, very underrated in my opinion. And I talk about, again, in detail, the timeline of working my job, starting Break Your Budget, side hustle, turning it into a full-time job, etc. It's the last couple of chapters. And there's also in here like little profiles of people who have, graduated college, went into different career paths, etc. Anyways, when it comes to my experience pivoting from 9 to 5 to content, it really wasn't like an overnight shift. It honestly was a 2 to 3 year incredibly gradual change. And I want to emphasize that it was not only incredibly gradual, but also very calculated and intentional at the same time. So I worked in finance for about 5 years, a little under 5 years. And 2 to 3 years into that, I kind of was like, this isn't going to work for me. Like, I know that this can't be my life forever. I don't like this. And I'm not cut out for these types of environments. I genuinely also believe that entrepreneurship is a very specific personality type. It is not for everyone, and that is okay. I don't have a corporate personality. I can't bullshit people. I'm very straight and to the point. I like autonomy and freedom. And those scenarios where you have to be super nice and put together, I just didn't do well in them. And I tried to play the game and I just can't do it. Some people do really well in that environment and they do really well in corporate, and that's why they end up being successful. I'm not one of those people. I'm very honest with myself about it, and I think that that's okay. It's something I want to normalize. All this to say, when I made that discovery, that was when I was like, okay, I need to figure out how to start something and find whatever this entrepreneurial journey is going to be for me, which at the time I didn't realize was going to be content because this was 2019. So it was sort of like before social media was even what it is today. Like, yes, TikTok was just starting to exist, but Instagram was just carousels, just individual photos, honestly. There really weren't a lot of like influencers, and TikTok wasn't a thing at that point in time. So I started Break Your Budget as sort of a spending diary journey, sharing what I was learning at work with other women who were also post-grad, figuring out how to navigate living in a city, spending, saving, all that kind of stuff. And I used my 9 to 5 as inspo for content to share. My intention with it was to just earn a little bit of extra money doing budgeting consults. I never really intended to become like a content creator in the way I am now. It's sort of just what happened. And I would say over the next couple of years, and especially during the pandemic, I continued with just posting content. I got on TikTok, like sort of the step-by-step of I'm on Instagram, TikTok becomes a thing. I start posting on TikTok. I grow an audience there. People come over to my Instagram. My Instagram starts growing. It's sort of a snowball effect. I started working with brands. Ultimately, I decided to move from Massachusetts to California. That had nothing to do with social media and everything to do with like a bunch of my friends were living in LA. I wanted to live somewhere else. It just made sense at the time. And I obviously had such a great time doing that. I ended up working my 9 to 5 East Coast hours on the West Coast for about 6 months. So this was 2021 going into 2022. And then by April of 2022, I was earning enough money from Break Your Budget and was able to quit that job. A couple of really important things though, as part of that, like transferring and quitting my job and going to content, there were some catalysts. First being that there was a true catalyst at work that gave me a reason to leave. So I had decided I was going to leave the job I was in no matter what, and I was interviewing for other jobs. I actually got 2 job offers, both of which I ended up declining. But I had made the decision to leave my job because I was getting passed over for a promotion that I very much so felt like I deserved, and it wasn't going to work for me. So that was the catalyst. And I would say, like, if you're in a job where you're like moderately fine and happy with, and you're doing content and both are going well, don't quit your job for no reason. Don't quit your job and leave a good thing to do content, especially if from a financial standpoint, you're not fully prepared. And so those were the other things that I really focused on before quitting. First is I made sure that I had guaranteed revenue for a couple of months post-grad. or not post-grad, post-quit. So I had a freelance client actually doing content for them for 3 months, which I actually did not like, and I don't do that anymore because I only like to make content for my own pages. However, I had that secured, so that was additional income, and I had also signed a 6-month brand deal contract, and I was earning money from my templates, both of which I still do that. But I had all of that sort of laid out. And then I also took a look at the benefits that I was going to be losing and how I was going to be replacing them. So I made sure my business was set up correctly, which I'll talk about in a little bit. I made sure I had a solo 401k and a retirement plan. I made sure that I explored my options for health insurance. Like, I was very thorough on all of the things that needed to happen to launch myself into self-employment successfully, as opposed to panic quitting my job to go 2 feet in on a content business. I will never recommend doing that. I think that that is a bad financial decision, and I don't like it when I see it online when people say, oh, like, I finally decided to leave my job to go all in on my business. No, I think that that's silly. I think it's financially irresponsible, because if you do not have income coming in, then it's harder to build a business that has legs to stand on long term, because you're focused on generating revenue because you need money. Okay, so until you're at a point with your side hustle, whether that be content or any other type of business, where you're out earning your stable job consistently for 3 to 6 months, I don't think you're ready to go full time. That's just my opinion. Again, you're open to disagree with that, but anytime that I've seen or talked to someone who quit their job sort of without a plan to explore content, it's never been very successful, and most of the time they do end up going back to a job because they don't like it, because there's too much income pressure. So that's my experience. There's more details, and it's much more organized again inside my book. The next question here is, what is the admin side of having your own business? Can you run through your setup? So it depends on every type of business, but I'll share how mine is. So from a business like registration standpoint, I'm registered as an LLC with an S Corp election, meaning that my business is an LLC, but I operate as an S Corp. And the reason for this is because there are tax benefits with being an S Corp. However, as an S Corp, you also have to do some administrative stuff that's a little bit annoying. So S Corps have to run payroll. So I'm set up with a payroll system. I use Gusto, and I pay myself an annual salary. So I pay myself an annual salary, I think of like $80,000 or $85,000. I'd have to look, I don't remember. I don't change it because that's like a reasonable salary for a social media manager, which is technically what I do. And I receive that money from my business account. It's transferred to my personal like bank accounts on a biweekly basis, just like any other job. And there are taxes withheld from that. And that's all done through my payroll system. The beauty of the S Corp, though, is that any money that I earn in addition to that salary, I don't have to pay self-employment tax on. So if you are thinking about starting a business and you're earning revenue, I think the threshold, I mean, there isn't like a set threshold, but the point in which it makes sense to be an S Corp is when you're earning enough money to pay yourself a salary annually. So like the 80K to 100K revenue. That is when you could consider being an S Corp. Talk to an accountant, which I am not, and I am not gonna ever answer accounting questions or give you tax advice because that's not my area of expertise. But I have a separate accountant who helps me with my taxes. I pay quarterly taxes. I'm on a schedule at this point now where it's a lot easier for me. And I have a solo 401k, so I contribute to my solo 401k as an employee, which I max out at $23,500 annually, and then also as an employer, which is like the employer match version, because I am the employer and employee of Break Your Budget. And for that, I can put in like up to 40K, which is my goal every year, depending on my revenue. So that's how my like retirement operates. I purchase health insurance through just like the Illinois health insurance marketplace. That's also what I did in California. Totally depends on your state. And I run all of my books through a system called Xero. So that's how I do my business expenses and whatnot, and categorize everything. And then I take my profit and loss and all of my business statements, and I give them to my accountant at the end of the year, and he files my taxes for me. So that is the administrative side of it. It doesn't require a lot of heavy lifting for maintenance, but I will say getting set up with all of it is really annoying and difficult, and I'd recommend you hire someone to help you do it if that is something you're interested in. But I can't help you because it's not my area of expertise and I don't have any recommendations for you. Moving on, how to negotiate a raise or a promotion when there isn't a budget for it. So I'm answering this question for two reasons. One, because I get a lot of questions like this of like, well, how can I do this when the resources don't exist? So point blank, like if there's no budget, it doesn't matter what you do, like you're not going to get the raise or the promotion. And I don't know why people ask questions like this to content creators as if like we have some magical hack or something to tell you to like make money appear where it doesn't exist. So initially, like I think that we just need to be honest about that. If there's no budget for you to get a raise or a promotion, doesn't matter if you do everything right 100 times over, you're not going to get one because there's no money, right? So keep that in mind. And I think if there's no budget for something that you deserve, then you have to just find a new job. And that might be a little bit hard, but that is what you have to do. So I'm not going to beat around the bush on that. That being said, regardless of the like monetary scenario, obviously if you're vying for a raise or a promotion, you do want to make sure that there's budget so that you can actually get the money you deserve, which is a conversation you have to have with your manager. You do want to set yourself up for success if you're going to go down the path of a promotion. And there are a couple of things you need to do in order to do that. First is having the conversation with your manager. So your manager needs to know that you want to be promoted, and just like you two need to agree on a generalized timeline of what's reasonable for that to happen. So part of that is putting together a promotion plan. You can do this with your manager or you can do it on your own and share it with your manager and then make adjustments. But to be promoted, generally speaking, your manager has to be involved and aware of the process. Because if you just operate as if, oh, if I do my job and I do everything right, I'm just going to get promoted. Yes, sometimes that happens, but a lot of times it doesn't. So I would just not even go down that path because I'm someone who likes certainty. So I would have the conversation with my manager. And what you'll want to do is make sure that you are aligned on what are the criteria and success metrics that you need to reach, and do you have the work, and are you getting the work in order to fulfill those requirements, those skills, whatever it is, depending on your job. The next thing you need to do is make sure that you're actually tracking against those, which I recommend you task track at work. Haven't talked about task tracking in a while. I do have a task tracking worksheet. It's called the Own Your Career Template. It's always in the show notes on all of my episodes if you are interested in it. But what it is a framework to help you measure and monitor and track your accomplishments against your goals when it comes to your job. Inside there's also like a framework and a shell to help you put together a promotion plan where basically you lay out your current skill set, and then you can also lay out the skill set or success criteria for the role you want to be promoted into. And then you have to sit there and map out what are the gaps that I need to fill, which again, you can do on your own or you can do with a manager. But really what you want to do is make sure you're tracking and providing proof that you've reached those metrics and reached those success criteria over however long it is that you need to work on them before the promotion happens. Usually promotions happen like either mid-year or end-year review cycle, so keep that timeline in mind. Like if you want to get promoted by the end of 2025, now July-ish is kind of a good time to make sure that seed, if it isn't already planted, like, make sure you're having that conversation with your manager ASAP so that he or she knows that that is something you're working towards for the end of the year and can help you get there. And if you have this conversation and you're reaching your goals and you're tracking against those goals, then generally you should be getting a raise based off of what you've agreed on. The challenge comes like, okay, if you do everything right and then you still don't get it, or if you do everything right and you're not happy with the money. With that information, you then need to decide, do I want to stick this out or do I want to find a new job? And for that, I cannot answer for you, right? Like you have to decide that. But I would look at career progression and like these sorts of scenarios where you're tracking your progress, you're having the conversations with your manager, you're seeing what the outcome is, look at it as data points. So if you're happy with what you're learning, the skills that you're developing, you get the raise, you have a good relationship with your manager, like that's great. Stay in your job and enjoy it while it lasts. If you do all of those things and you don't get it, like that's a data point for you to use to make a decision. You are not stuck. You can find a new job. It may not always be easy. It may not happen right away, but it is possible. And sometimes I think we just need to be reminded of that, of like, you can find something else if you're not being treated or getting what you need from your current role. The next question here is how to decide when to pivot careers and mitigate risk. So generally speaking, if you're at a point where you're asking, like, how do I know when it's time to pivot careers? Like, you're probably ready for some sort of pivot, whether it be just a slight pivot or a bigger pivot. I do know the person who asked this question works, I believe, in like tech marketing. So I don't know what you're planning to pivot to, but I'll use that as an example. So, let's say you want to pivot from tech to marketing just in general. What I would recommend you do is really think about, okay, what are the current skills that I've learned in my job? What are the skills that I want from my next job and the experience I want from my next job? And what are the gaps here that need to be filled? And with those gaps, you can answer a few questions. Are there skills that I can learn in my current job that are transferable? Or, maybe I need to take a step in the right direction, one job and two jobs to get to that point, like, a couple of steps before you reach the actual pivot that you're looking for. So it's sort of like a promotion plan. The difference being the job that you want to have might be a little bit different and non-linear, and that's okay, because you don't have to go, when you're climbing the career ladder, like you don't have to climb it perfectly diagonally. Like sometimes you go up, you go over, you go up, you go over. Sometimes you go back and down, and then you go up 2 steps. Like it just depends on the circumstances. So a couple of other questions too you can ask yourself. Are you hitting a ceiling on either career growth and potential? So like, what are the avenues for you to continue up on the path you're on? If they're not exciting to you, probably time for a pivot. Or income, if again, the path you're looking at, the income and salary and benefits and whatnot just isn't there, could be time for a pivot. Are you feeling unfulfilled and are you looking to learn more? At any job, you should either be learning or earning, ideally both, but if you're not getting any, it's time to go. So if you are not learning anything, it's time for a pivot, and you need to decide, do I want to move to a different company and do a similar job where maybe there's more resources, or do I want to get a different type of job either within the same company or fully at a different company? What are the current skills you have that can be used for other types of jobs? Transferable skills are corporate currency. I highly recommend you keep an ongoing log of transferable skills. I talk about this in Own Your Career, which is why it's so important to read it, because you can always go back to it as a reference book, which I recommend you do. But transferable skills would be things like, different softwares and whatnot, using Excel or Power BI, communication skills, people skills, things like that. The next question here is like, what type of lifestyle do you want? So if the path you're on isn't going to provide the lifestyle you're looking for, then it could be time for a pivot. Like, let's say you work as a teacher and you really want to live like a super high lux life. On a teacher salary, generally speaking, like that's probably not going to happen. So you need to decide, how do I want to pivot the skills I've learned from being a teacher to something else? My old roommate actually was a teacher and pivoted, and her pivot required, a couple of different steps. She pivoted first to, one type of job where she was doing more of administrative work, wasn't really what she was looking for. And then she got more of like a chief of staff job, gave her a little bit more of what she was looking for. And then she finally found a job that suited her skill set where she got paid more money. So it took a couple of steps, and that's totally normal. So really think about the lifestyle you're looking for and if the path you're on is going to get you there. And then the last question is like, what is your timeline? Do you want to do this in the immediate term and pretty quickly, or do you want to give yourself a couple years to navigate figuring it out? Maybe that could be exploring a side hustle. It's going to take a little bit of time to start up a business and really get momentum there. Or, do you want to move into a lateral job at a different company, learn different skills, get into a different industry, and then take another step? Another one of my friends just experienced this where She was climbing the ladder in a very specific industry and she likes the job she's doing, but she didn't want to stay in that industry. So she took a lateral job in a totally different industry where the pay is pretty much the same, but it gets her foot in the door for, different types of companies going forward. So that's an example of like, okay, maybe, she wants to pivot into doing a different type of job, but the first step was getting into the different type of industry, if that makes sense. So really think about this and be honest with yourself and give yourself enough time to figure it out. Like, something I really want to emphasize is that your career is long, right? You're working for probably 40 years, 30 years if you're really smart with your money. But you're working for a long time. So you're going to go through different career phases and that's normal. And you don't have to have it figured out at 25. Like, that's the biggest myth going ever. I don't know why we put so much pressure on mid-20s because you have actually so much time. Like, I had 3 or 4 jobs by my mid-20s. And I feel like that was a lifetime ago and it was only a couple years ago. So, you have plenty of time. The last question here that we're going to wrap this up with is, I quit a toxic job with no other job lined up. Do you have any advice on how to stay positive? Yes, I would use this as a time to explore all of your options, right? So I understand quitting a toxic job and how empowering that can feel, but also how scary it can feel because it's like, okay, I'm quitting a job and I don't have any other plan right now. And now I just sort of have to bide my time. You will know, like, if quitting the job is the best decision for you, you will know. The challenge when you quit is like you can't collect unemployment and you don't get any severance. So from a financial standpoint, there's a little bit of pressure. I wouldn't quit a toxic job unless you have an emergency fund to fall back on. The challenge is like the job market is weird right now. So it's kind of hard to know how long it's going to take to find a new job. So I would use the time off as an opportunity to not only like apply maybe to different types of jobs and whatnot, but also to up-level your skill set. So you could take a class, you could take a certification to add to your resume, and then also to like get a part-time job or explore some sort of part-time work to give you a couple of things. First being structure, because I think in periods of time where you're not working, especially if it's just a bridge time where you're planning to go back to another job, it's super, super important to make sure you have structure in your day so that you feel like you have purpose. Structure provides purpose. The other layer is to like earn a little bit of money, right? What that will do is help take the pressure off. But the third layer of this is you may find through working part-time work, maybe going on a self-discovery journey, etc., a different passion or interest of yours that you can pursue, whether it be in an individual setting or a corporate setting. And I feel like that can be very helpful. I think we need to normalize and bring back part-time work. Not in the sense of like supplementing income, like you have to work multiple jobs, but more just in the sense of it's still a really great way to earn money, have structure, and learn things and interact with people. And I think, if you're going through a career sabbatical, or I should say a corporate career sabbatical, it's a great way to spend your time. So that's what I would do in between jobs. I actually had a friend who this happened to. Last year, he quit a job that was like really not working out very well and decided to study for the GMAT and go back to business school. So he had some time to like really focus on that and accelerate the process and apply for scholarships and do that kind of thing and be really clear about that being the right path. So sometimes the break can provide clarity for you. And I think that should be a very positive and celebrated experience. So with that, I'm going to wrap this episode up. I hope you liked it. My goal with these is to be just like a little bit more casual, chatty, and give you my actual thoughts. So if you enjoyed, let me know. As always, I'm open to polite feedback only. So if you have something mean to say, I'm going to say something mean right back to you as usual. And I will catch you next week. I may take a break on the pod for a week or two because I'm feeling really behind. So the jury's out on that. If you don't see me next week, you will see me the week after. Thanks so much for listening and have a good day. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to leave me a review. Make sure to follow me on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next week.